is Maggie, and she's joining us. She's the star of the show on a daily basis. Anyway, today's topic is trust and looking at the role that trust plays in our self expression and our sense of safety in the world and more. So, before we get started, let's just take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen just flooding your lungs and flowing into your bloodstream and bringing oxygen to every cell and every organ. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, any stress, fatigue, negativity. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant bright light lighting you up from the inside out, energizing and electrifying and illuminating and just brightening every portion of your being, electrons and molecules and cells and your whole body. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining stress or tension, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together. Just really softly rub your fingers against your palms. Feel how wonderful that sensation is if you presence yourself to your fingertips and all the little nerves in your palms, and bring yourselves present right here, right now. Good morning, Rosalind. Great to have you here. And welcome to everybody who's joining us. It's Thursday, and today we're talking about trust. And what does it mean to trust ourselves and trust the universe? And this actually arose as my topic this morning because like 5 minutes before we got on, I didn't know what I was going to talk about, and I realized that I very much operate on trust that the right thing will come. And so today, that's our topic. What I notice is that trust for me is an experience of allowing things to unfold and trusting that that life is happening for me and through me rather than to me. Trusting that I don't have to try and control everything. So maybe I wonder if it's, I don't think it's an abdication. I think it's an allowance of being present, more present in the moment. And it's interesting. This also arose as a topic because I was working with a client yesterday who was talking. What we were talking about is the fact that I find in working with clients over months, even doing very deep and real work, months into our process, we'll come upon a topic or an issue that is like the mammoth issue, the big, or one of the prevailing fundamental life issues. Good morning, Christina. Welcome. Great to have you here. So it's so fascinating to me that we can be working and doing all this deep work, and then months into something, all of a sudden we're uncovering something that has been pervasive and persistent. And in any case, for this person, it was an issue of self-trust. And we were doing a session around that. And it was really interesting because what arose for them, good morning, Suzanne, welcome, great to have you here. What arose for this person in the face of conversation around trust, or the experience of trust and lack of trust, or what was that there was all kinds of judgment, huge voices of judgment, and that all of that judgment was undermining their sense of trust for themselves, judgment from themselves and judgment from others. And so Rosalind says, trusting ourselves versus trust the universe has our back. Trusting self, not to second guess self, and trusting the universe is guiding us even when it may feel like free falling at times, knowing the landing will be safe and guided. And that's beautiful, Rosalind. And sometimes even the landing doesn't feel so safe, while it still may be guided. I don't know. Um, I, I think that, good morning, Dennis. Welcome. Great to have you here. And I, I think that trusting the universe maybe allows trust for self also. It's interesting to be looking at that balance between trusting the universe and trusting self. And I think self-trust is very much tied in with the way that we judge ourselves or don't judge ourselves. And when we have these deep voices of judgment, it makes it hard to trust ourselves. If we believe that we're not capable, how are we going to trust ourselves? If we believe that we are unreliable, how are we going to trust ourselves? So there are all these judgments that we overlay upon ourselves, and those judgments do act as a deterrent to our ability to trust ourselves, the harsh judgments. And the thing is, those judgments are often very much based on judgments from others that we have then internalized, uh, or disappointment. So I remember growing up with feeling like I was a failure because I wasn't meeting the desires or expectations of Gia. Thank you. You're so sweet. Welcome. It's great to have you here. Um, I was just talking about judgment, um, feeling like I was a disappointment because I hadn't met expectations of my parents, for example. And so if we have this self-perception of being a disappointment, being a failure, not doing something that somebody was disappointed by, but actually taking that on as a persona, as an identity, then how do we trust ourselves, right? And so I hadn't put all this together before this wonderful opportunity to be speaking with you directly. These things emerge oftentimes as we have these conversations. But thank you, Gia. Very sweet. Um, when self-trust and self-love is very much dependent or interrelated with the ways in which we talk to ourselves about ourselves and the ways that we perceive ourselves. We spoke earlier this week about taking a vantage point from outside ourselves as if we were another person viewing ourselves to see what's there to be seen. One of the reasons for that is that most likely we would judge ourselves less harshly from this external vantage point observing ourselves. And when we recognize the judgment then it gives us an ability to challenge it potentially, right? And that's an important thing to do because it impacts our experience of the world. This was another part of this conversation and session with my client, was that all these voices of judgment were, when they were released, it was so familiar. It was so familiar that there was a sense of loss, even though it was really clear that that judgment got to be released. And the other thing that became really clear is that without self-trust, we don't feel free to express our authenticity, our authentic selves in the world, because we're always monitoring, we're always calibrating and calculating to make sure that we're staying within the lines. But when we trust ourselves, then we're able to be more freely expressed. And it's a really interesting dynamic. So self-judgment, self-trust, self-expression, this whole package, and the way that those elements interact with one another. So Christina says, a more recent event has made me somewhat less trustful, mainly because I did go into a situation with 100% trust, and it was an awful decision, LOL. Still sorting the lessons in it, but I have to admit, as much as I was disappointed in the other party, it has been the distrust in myself for making that leap of faith in the first place. Christina, I can so relate to that. Thank you so much for speaking that. I went through a deep period of distrust of myself and deep shame. Welcome, welcome, Tammy. It's wonderful to have you here, because of certain decisions I had made. And the thing that we can look at for those decisions, I mean, some of the decisions, as I look back in the past, some of the decisions that I made ended up with really tough consequences for me. And the thing that I am able to now do, and I invite you to do, Christina, is to look back at that moment when you made that decision and look at the what I expect to be the truth, that in that moment you made the best decision you could make. And that's where this idea or conversation around judgment and compassion comes in. So at the moment that you made that decision that became something awful, you had whatever information you had whatever dynamic within you that you had, and given all of those parts that existed in that moment, you made the best decision you could make. And now you get to see in hindsight what maybe you didn't see when you were making that decision. And that happened for me too. For instance, I was looking at doing a business venture with somebody, and I hung out with them and got to know them for 6 months, and then got involved in this business choice that turned out to be horrific for me, with all kinds of huge consequences. And I blamed myself. I didn't trust myself for quite some time after that, telling myself, I had made this terrible decision. But when I look back really from an objective, more objective vantage point, I can look at all the pieces. I can also see the things that were driving me to make that decision. And the fact that we get to have that additional perspective rather than judging it and berating ourselves for that, we get to learn and grow from that. And to recognize that we really do, in any given moment, we make the best decisions we can make. They may be terrible decisions, but what we get to look at is what are the things that drove those decisions that we can grow and learn from. So Suzanne says, I can totally relate. My dad always made me feel like I didn't achieve enough, still follows me through my life. So there, I'm glad you said that, Suzanne, because there's a point at which, we're programmed with all kinds of things as we grow up. And this is another thing that came up in that session that was so brilliant. That there were all these judgments, and the experience of the client that I was working with is they recognized that they were holding on to the judgments like for dear life, holding on so hard that that their fingers were cutting into their palms, that they were holding on to this judgment. And it's interesting because we do that. We hold on to the judgments of ourselves, the stories about ourselves, the stories about our past. We hold on to it for dear life because it's what we know. And there is a terror and a sorrow at terror at the unfamiliar, and sorrow at, or sadness, grief, loss at letting go of something that's so familiar. And then there's an emptiness. And this vast emptiness is there, like this hollowness, because, oh my gosh, everything I've known is now, it's not there. And what do I fill that space with? What do I, who am I now that that is gone? And then we get to fill ourselves with what we choose rather than what had been thrust upon us. And that experience of acquainting oneself with what do we really want, what do we really desire, who are we really, without all of that judgment, without all of that pain. So Robert says, I trust that the universe provides us with the basic needs. I trust too. I trust that life is happening for me and through me rather than to me, and that on some level I designed the experience before I got here, that I designed the intention and the experience of this life for myself, all with all of it, all the tragedies, all the triumphs. And coming from that place of trust, it enables me to show up more authentically. And Christine says, wow, Mira, your story is almost identical to mine. Thank you. You're so welcome. And what we get to do is to unclench our hold on all these stories and judgments that are not our own, that we have absorbed, that we have really taken on, like as a part of ourselves, like this film that has molded itself to our shape, and that we wear, believing that that's who we are, we get to release that. And I know it's scary because we don't know who we are without that. And we get to figure out who we are. We get to discover, we get to move into that emptiness that is so deeply unfamiliar, and to move through that to this place of more presence and expression. It's holding on to all those identities that we are now holding, that like the other person that thrust that upon us isn't even active anymore. Now we've caught that. It's like they threw us a ball, we caught the ball, and now we're holding on to the ball for dear life, thinking that we are the ball, you know? So Rosalind says, is trust the same thing as having faith? I think in so many ways it is. If that's the case, at the core is faith needed for growth and expanding into spirituality? Well, that's a great question. I think that on some level, when we experience safety, there's faith. We have faith that we're safe. We have faith that when we get into a car and drive the car, we are assuming, we are having trust, we are having faith that we are safe. That when we're walking across the street, we have faith that, or trust that we're going to be able to cross the street without getting struck by a car or something falling out of the sky, right? Like we operate in a state of trust, but it's to varying degrees. If we didn't have trust, we wouldn't be able to function. We live on certain assumptions of continuity. We trust that um, that putting one foot in front of the other is going to get us from point A to point B. Everything we do, we trust that it's going to, that there's some continuity, right? That there's some level of predictability. We trust that. And what happens to break our trust and leave us in a place of confusion, what happens is that something that we predicted or expected happens differently than we predicted or expected. And sometimes it happens so differently that it rocks our world and rocks our sense of what's real and what's not real, rocks our sense of what is safe or whether we're safe or not. Because what happens is it challenges our underlying assumptions. And when our assumptions are challenged, all of a sudden the world is not predictable, and then it undermines our sense of safety. So for growth and expanding into spirituality, I think it's an act of faith to believe that life is happening for me and through me. It's an act of faith to believe that everything is unfolding in its perfection. So I would tend to say that just being human beings, we live in varying degrees of faith, and in spiritual growth or in authentic expression, there needs to be a certain sense of safety, which I believe is founded in faith and trust. At least that's today's working hypothesis. Robert says, it's when we step out of our comfort zone that we discover our greatness. I tend to agree with you, Robert, that when we When we imagine our greatest selves, then that greatest self is 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 definitely outside of our comfort zone, and stepping into that, stepping up to that, is when we are expressing our greatness, when we move into the calling of our soul, when we embrace our grandest dreams. And that is typically very much outside of our comfort zone. And then we allow ourselves to be drawn up by that vision. That's something. Hello, Elaine. I'm sorry it took so long to welcome you in. It's great to have you here. Um, One of the things that I do with my clients is create a vision statement. And the vision statement is it's like it's an incantation. It's an incantation in that it's a statement that calls us forward, that calls us into our greatness. And it's an individual thing. It's different for everybody, but it's really an expression of what we came here to be. Like, who are we and why are we here? Each of us has our own unique soul song. And that's what this incantation is about. And it calls us into our greatness, to be this greater expression, or this fuller expression of who we are and what we came here for. So trust and faith. And really, when we are trusting ourselves, we then can move into a fuller expression of our authenticity, right? If I don't trust myself, I'm going to be censoring myself all the time. And I went through quite a long period of that throughout my life, just really not trusting myself, and and monitoring. And it takes so much energy to do that all the time, to be vigilant and on high alert to making sure that, or trying to make sure that you don't make a misstep, and that, you know, calibrating the environment all the time. It's exhausting, rather than just being and trusting yourself. So and trusting that things are going to work out, even when they look terrible, even when it feels like, oh my gosh, I just don't know how this is going to shake out. And when our faith is shaken, that's when we shut down, right? Because there's too much to juggle. So trust is fundamental. Elaine says, for me, trusting I have all I need to experience life through the unknown as life unfolds. Trusting I have all I need to experience life through the unknown as life unfolds. I love that. That's beautiful, Elaine. Yes. Trusting that, and that's another way, in the way I'm hearing it, is another way of saying I'm trusting life. I'm trusting that life is happening for me and through me. I'm trusting the universe. I'm trusting that things are unfolding as they're meant to unfold, and that I don't have to understand it. It allows me to breathe more freely. It allows me to relax a bit and not be trying to control life, because we can't. It's an illusion to try and control it. Robert says, I believe that trust and faith are slightly different, but with many common points. I welcome, John. Great to have you here. I think I'd be interested to hear the nuances. I think faith as a word is typically more associated with religion or spirituality or some kind of higher power, perhaps, and at least generally the way that the word is used. But trust, I really do see how we operate on trust pretty continually. Like we're trusting that gravity works. We're trusting all kinds of things all the time. We're trusting that when we speak, other people are going to understand. We're trusting that all kinds of things, continuity, really. And without that assumption of continuity of some sort or another, how would we function, really? So Suzanne says, I felt that I was reacting instead of acting. I changed that, but it took me a long time to realize. Yeah. And so, Suzanne, that's such a great point, is that so much of our lives are reactive because we're living from past experiences brought into the present. And as we clear more and more of the trauma of the past and our hurt from the past, and even our beliefs, as we hold these things with an open hand rather than identity, then we're able to become less reactive, for sure. And Robert says, totally. I guess if we see it more like life happens through me rather than life happens for me is a greater version. If we see it more like life happens through me rather than life happens for me is a greater version. I think it's both. I think life happens through me, that I am a vehicle of life expressing itself. Again, my hypotheses, just don't take it as truth. Try it on, see if it works for you. But life expressing itself through each of us, and life happening for me, like my life is happening for me and is supporting me in my growth, in my learning, in my expansion. Rosalind says there was a previous topic called fear of missing out. So trust in the unfolding is that the choice or path taken is for your higher good. Exactly, Rosalind. So the fear of missing out, what is that? It's distrust, right? Is being wanting to control things and feeling like maybe you're not having your hand on all the levers. I think trust is letting go of the illusion of control. So Elaine says, for me, trusting myself is trusting life as all comes from within as one. So trusting myself is trusting life as all comes from within as one. Well, when we're really present, I agree that trusting self is trusting life. When we're in alignment, when we're not in alignment necessarily, I guess they are completely integrated. Because if I trust myself, then I'm trusting life more. If I'm trusting life, I think it's possible to be trusting life, but not necessarily trusting yourself completely. But if that's true, then you're not actually trusting life. So thank you for that, Elaine. Yes, it seems that they are inextricably intertwined. Christina says, still fresh with me, beginning to trust a little more, but in certain situations, like business partners and even spiritual folks, if there there's a little more trepidation. Yeah. And so what I noticed too is that as I trust myself more, I'm able to trust my judgment more. So I'm able to, now I understand that what happened is you made a decision, you didn't see something, so now you're just putting your feet back in, or your toe, dipping your toe in to see, where do I trust, where do I not trust. But I think it comes back, Christina, to being able um, to build trust for yourself, with yourself, to be able to see the bigger picture. One of the things that I noticed about myself when I got myself into bad situations was that I knew better. Like there was, and when I say I knew better, there was a part of me that was conscious, or like I had a feeling, a gut feeling that I overrode, that I had some skepticism, and then I chose to ignore it. And that's when I've gotten myself in the worst situations. And so when I trust myself, when I trust my gut, then I can navigate circumstances with people more effectively. And I'm wondering if maybe that's the case for you too, where you maybe possibly overrode your intuitive knowing about something. And Suzanne says control gives you a false sense of safety. Exactly. Because control really is an illusion. We can try to control. The more we try to control, it's just exhausting, right? And it is, I think control is just an illusion in and of itself. So anyway, it turned into a great topic, and all because of trust. So thank you so much, all of you, for joining us and for participating. And these are such enriching conversations for me. I'm deeply grateful to you for sharing this time. Elaine says, yes, as I let go of beliefs and judgment, it sets me free from the mind and heart centered in the now to observe. And yes, this takes practice. That's perfect, as life gives us plenty of experiences to practice. Exactly, exactly, exactly. So I think you nailed it, Elaine, and that's a perfect way to end the day, is recognizing that beliefs and judgment are overlays on top of who we are, and they we are not our beliefs, we are not our judgments. We can use them as tools to support us in navigating through the world. But when we become so identified with our beliefs and our judgments, they are actually inhibiting our fuller expression. So, with that, I'm just going to say thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. This is Maggie. We go live each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I invite you to check out all the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network. And until next time, so great to be with you, and find that connection to your heart and your soul, and trust yourself.